Morning, everyone. I'm Jen Homer. I'm one of the partners at Strategic Benefits, and this is actually our second webinar that we've held with one of our partners through our True Network, MedOne. We are going to be running a pharmacy series this entire year. A majority of them will be webinar-based, but we are also hoping to host MedOne in town this year. The guest speakers today, the first one's Dr. Norman Westerfeld, and he's actually a clinical account manager and pharmacist by trade, and has a background in rheumatology, which, you know, we all know with the immune therapy drugs and the cost of those right now, it's a very big topic. And then Matt Lee is our right arm over at MedOne, so we're excited to have him on board. But today we are just really going to continue talking about the RX benefit puzzle. We're not going to have all the answers today. I don't know that we'll ever have all of them, but I do think information's power, and really going to spend time on biosimilars that are, you know, it's pretty much every meeting that I'm having with clients, like, what do you know about these biosimilars? So I am going to go ahead and turn it over to them. We will watch the chat feature, and we will have plenty of time before the hour's up for Q&A as well. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself to prevent any feedback and turn it over to Matt and Norm.
Great. Thanks, Jen, and good morning, everyone. Jen, quick thumbs up that A, you can hear me, and B, you can see my slide. That was a question for you, Jen. Thumbs up, yes? Okay, thank you. All right, great. Well, good morning. And we wanted to come together, and as Jen just mentioned in her introduction, we are partners together with Strategic Benefits as part of the True Network. But really, beyond that, we have a passion for helping to bring awareness and helping educate just what's going on in this prescription space, the RX space. So as we've launched on a series of webinars here that we will do throughout the year in partnership with Strategic Benefits, we're coming out of the year with what we call the RX Heat Check. So as Jen mentioned, we certainly welcome anyone to pop in chat, ping us with questions as today goes. We really hope this is informative. And by the way, grab a cup of coffee if you don't have one yet. Take a deep breath. Just sit back and enjoy hearing just some information that we hope can not only help you in your daily job, but can also be something where we're bringing you a number of aha moments that even outside of your work, you can use some of these in conversation. And we are going to keep things engaging, informal, loose, and we're going to have a little bit of fun. But to do that, let me just advance my slide. So as Jen mentioned, I'm Matt Lee. I serve as the VP of Sales and Marketing here at MedOne. MedOne is a PBM based out of Dubuque, Iowa, but we do serve all around the country. We've been actually in business since 1999 as a PBM, which is very exciting for us as we get ready to celebrate 25 years this coming spring in April. I'm actually located in Northeast Ohio. I live just north of Akron, Ohio. So knowing that several of you are on the phone from the Southwest Ohio or Kentucky area, I'm not too far from you. Also on the phone or on the call with us today is Dr. Norman Westervelt. We call him Dr. Norm, and you'll get a chance to hear from him as well between the two of us. We're going to bounce around with a few different topics today. And again, this is meant to be educational and informational for you. And we're going to look at some things that are happening in the news right now. What are some headlines as we flip the calendar into 2024? What are some headlines happening in the RX space? We'll talk about just a few things where we're seeing some of the importance of member education popping up. And then as Jen mentioned, we'll give you a summary of the biosimilar landscape. As we all know, that's such a hot topic coming out of 2022, even more so in 2023, and it will continue going forward. For any of you who were on our last webinar that we did in the fourth quarter of last year, we showed a newspaper visual, and we used that to talk about some headlines. We're going to bring that back for this morning and look at the same idea of what are some headlines that are hitting as we flip the calendar into 2024 that are impacting us in the RX space. And I've said this all throughout the years. I first came into the prescription benefit space in 1999, and it's fascinating to me to think about as you look at these headlines here, or what we've talked about in the past, or what's been even in the news around drugs over the past year. Compare that to what was in the headlines 20 years ago, and it's very different. And it's made the RX space more complex than ever before. And we know that those of you attending on the webinar today, you may be a self-funded employer group. You may be a fully insured employer group. You may be looking to figure out what you can do to address the spend and the things happening on your plan. You may be looking to make some changes. Either way, these are some topics that really create the urgency for more attention around the prescription benefit than ever before. We already talked about biosimilars. We're calling it this morning biosimilars. We've only just begun. I'm not going to steal Dr. Norm's thunder for later in the webinar, but we're going to talk about this a little bit more. In the upper right-hand corner here, you've got AbbVie. AbbVie, for many of you who may be aware, and those of you who may not, AbbVie is the manufacturer of Humira. Humira is that leading drug for the past several years that now has a biosimilar available. So for the first time, really, all throughout 2023, they faced major competition. Well, AbbVie, bless you, I think that was a sneeze. AbbVie, as the manufacturer of drugs, has said, okay, we had our day in the sun with Humira. Now we need to keep going because they're a big, giant drug manufacturer. They're a publicly held company. They have a stock price. They're responsible to their shareholders. So here we have a headline where they made a clean sweep as the top ad spender in 2023 for drugs that were not Humira. It was for Rinvoq and Skyrizi. So you see they're not losing a beat. They're moving on. Drop one down. This is an interesting headline. I came across this just last month, and it's very interesting in the world we're in. And we are saying weight loss drugs cut into Walmart's snack food profits. There was an article in CNBC last month talking about how Walmart came together and they were really trying to figure out what to do to address the threat of revenue loss for their snack food aisle. Now, many of us have been in Walmarts. You know that pretty much as soon as you walk in, you're being bombarded by snack foods right there as the specials, and then there's certainly a whole snack food aisle. Well, what they've realized is with the focus coming out of 2023, it was all the rage in 2023 around Ozempic and GLP-1s and the magic weight loss pill you can take. They've realized that that's threatening their snack food aisle. So what they're going to start trying to find ways to do is use advertising, social media. Heck, now that I'm even probably talking about Walmart and snack food aisle, I'm probably going to get a lot of advertisements now on my phone for Walmart and specifically perhaps some snack food specials. I like Doritos, I'm not going to lie. But here, take a look at this of just the world we're in now as we now have, Walmart concerned about their snack food aisle profits. Go one more to the left. This really has been lurking over the past 2-3 years, but it really became a headline last year as the number of adults coming out of the pandemic that are seeking Adderall has created an overall drug shortage for that particular drug. And historically, for the most part, the takers of Adderall were adolescents or children, certainly some adults at times, but coming out of the pandemic, more adults than ever were seeking Adderall. And now you have a drug shortage of that medication. Very interesting. And then this is not a typo. I did put the Super Bowl logo in here because as we jump into the year, we are about to be bombarded with all things Super Bowl. I will profess this is a little painful to me. While I live in Northeast Ohio right now, I am originally from the Buffalo area. Go Bills. I am a Bills Mafia, tried and true. Very painful to yet here we are again, becoming so close, and yet we will not be playing this coming Sunday. But with that, let me transition into talking about these headlines, into giving you some more information, and we're gonna have a little bit of fun with this as well. For those of you that have never heard me present before, I like to engage my audience. I like to get you thinking, like to get your minds going. Feel free to keep sipping your coffee, but we have 5 quiz questions that are going to span a wide number of topics, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with it. So I just talked about the Super Bowl coming up this coming Sunday. So feel free to jot down on your notebook, put it in chat if you are so bold to allow everyone to see your answers. And we'll see who can become the trivia champion of today's webinar. But question number 1, speaking of the Super Bowl, how many Americans are expected to call in sick the Monday after the Super Bowl? It could be anywhere from one of these 4 answers: 14.1 million, 18.8 million, 20.7 million, or 23.6 million. What is that magic number for those who will be calling in sick? They're saying that this coming Super Bowl could be one of the most watched Super Bowls ever. I'm not a Swiftie, but I think there's some influence there, as well as a matchup of 2 very strong teams. So for those of you that have your answer in your mind, we'll remove 2 of them. It's not A or C. It is B. 18.8 million people are expected to call in sick next Monday, the day after the Super Bowl. And that's not even including another, I think it was another 7 or 8 million who will conveniently be a little late coming into work the day after the Super Bowl. Okay, let's keep a little Super Bowl fun going. Avid lover of chicken wings here. Again, I'm from Buffalo. But how many chicken wings will be consumed during this year's Super Bowl? 14 million, 250 million, 800 million, or 1.4 billion. Any of you chicken wing lovers out there? I see people are popping some answers here in the chat. Love it, love it, love the engagement. Okay, here we are. Chicken wings, Super Bowl. It's not, whoops, A or B. So Tim's in the running. Tim's in the running, maybe. It is truly D. Tim wins the prize on that one. 1.4 billion chicken wings will be consumed. No wonder people are going to be either late to work or calling in sick the next day, right? Okay, enough on the Super Bowl. Let's get to some industry. Speaking of the Super Bowl, we all know this. We are about to be bombarded with advertisements. So for this coming Super Bowl, how much will it cost to purchase a 30-second ad slot during the Super Bowl this coming year? Cindy rings in with a C. Cindy's playing the card of, hey, if in doubt, just pick C. Used to do that back in the test days and the SAT days. 3 million, 5 million, 7 million, or 10 million. No Googling. If any of you are Googling, I'll get rid of the 2 of the answers here. We're down to 5. We're $7 million. And show me the money. It is $7 million for a 30-second ad slot. And we thought this would be interesting to go back and look over a little bit of history here. Take a look at this over the past years. Going all the way back to 1989, right around that turn of that decade, just under $700,000 for a 30-second slot. Then you saw right around the turn of the century, 1.6 million. 2009, 3 million. 2019, 5.3 million. 7 million. I wouldn't be surprised if by 2029 it's double digits, right? For a 30-second ad slot. Now, what in the world does this have to do with drugs? We all know it. We are going to see drug advertisements. In fact, there is a drug. Oh, Dr. Norm, correct me. I know we were talking about it. Veoza. There is going to be, right before kickoff. Did I say that right, Norm?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Right before kickoff, there is going to be an ad for Veoza. Veoza is, Norm?
Yeah, so Veoza is basically a new medication that just hit the market in mid 2023, but it helps to treat hot flashes in postmenopausal women. So that's a big area, very complicated symptoms and everything. But it's the unique thing about it is it's FDA approved, of course, but it is non-hormonal. Which with the hormone treatments, there's risk for cardiovascular risk factors, and then also with cancer concerns with that treatment as well. So it's a exciting time treatment topic, but yeah, it has the potential to help treat a lot of people dealing with that. And to Matt's point, there's going to be possibly, I don't want to steer thunder, but there may be a little bit higher different audience as well.
Thanks, Norm. Yeah, so here you go. Veoza treating hot flashes. I read an article about how there's an increasing number of females who are interested in the NFL this year than ever before. Shocker, who just announced her new concert coming up at the Grammys the other night. It's none other than Taylor Swift. So sure enough, they're trying to grab a captive audience in advertising that Veoza drug. So there you go. Now when you're sitting around with your friends or family right before the Super Bowl, right before kickoff, you can call that this ad's coming on. You can know what it's for. You can know how much it costs for them to broadcast this ad, and then you can eat some chicken wings along with it. Okay. So what's interesting is the Super Bowl is worldwide, but this kind of ad for Veoza or any drug ads would only be ever seen in the United States or New Zealand. I think I might have mentioned this on our last webinar, but those are the only two states in the world that allow direct-to-consumer advertising for drugs. So let's talk about that a little more. What was the top-selling drug in 2023? Anyone have any guesses? Oh, Veoza. I'll pop that in the chat for you, Jen. Top-selling drug for 2023. Keytruda, Ozempic, Dupixent, or Humira. Some of these drugs we've all seen the ads for. It's either Keytruda or Humira. It is actually Keytruda. Now, to be very fair and clear, Keytruda has a lot of use, both within the prescription drug benefit, but also on the medical benefit because of what it can do to help treat cancer. But here you can see, as we jump into 2024, these are what are expected to be the top selling drugs. And I don't think anyone can say we're overly too surprised at Keytruda. The amount certainly is staggering. But look at what's lurking on number 2 right there, Ozempic. And I did some looking back, going even back as simple as 2, 3, 4 years ago. And you certainly didn't see Ozempic lurking anywhere near the top like this. Dupixent's been around for a while. Certainly you see Eliquis moving around, Biktarvy as well, but just very interesting. Number 8, that's a COVID drug. And so interesting there, past couple of years, the COVID drugs have been very high, and you're starting to see them move all the way down. At the very bottom, Skyrizi by AbbVie. Interesting to see that one with how much AbbVie's paying for the advertising of it. Certainly they're going to want to see that try to move up. Okay, last quiz question. What drug had the most TV ad spend in 2023? So we just talked about the top selling drugs, but what drug had the most TV ad spend in 2023 with over $383 million? Dupixent, Rinvoq, Skyrizi, or Jardiance? Anyone have any guesses there? We've got a Rinvoq guess. Okay. Rinvoq's in the running. Rinvoq or Skyrizi? Jen, you were close. Skyrizi. It is Skyrizi. $383 million. Here's how it stacks up right here. So if you look down this list, I'm sure many of us can probably remember 7, 8, 9, if not all of these commercials. Dr. Norm, what were you saying over the Christmas break? You were watching Christmas Story, and what were the 2 drug ads that came on?
Yeah, we so this is a tradition I think I carried down from my parents. I don't really know why I do it, but I kind of instinctively just turn on TNT and have a Christmas Story running in the background throughout the whole day. And I don't know if I really caught much of the movie. It kind of replays it all over and over. But every time I looked up, there was either an ad for Ozempic or Vioza. I mean, it was like clockwork. I mean, that was on more than the movie, it felt like. And it was pretty shocking to me. But then once I thought about it, I said, well, if you think about where all everybody's congregating and sitting around in the living room, where we're all eating, stuffing our faces with cookies and good foods and everything, and then you have women who have like brought the whole family together, probably in that same age range, and possibly dealing with those symptoms. And I was like, man, that's genius. I wonder what the ad spend for that Christmas Day cost, and that may go up for drug companies in the future.
Yeah, interesting. So here you can see all the common brand names and their logos on the right that we've all become very used to thanks to advertising. But again, look at AB B, number one and number two. It's just so interesting. And then they bring it up again down at number eight with Vraylar for depression, schizophrenia, and bipolar. Okay, well, we hope those quiz questions kind of helped give me a little bit of an energy boost, some interesting aha moments, things you can talk about with your family and friends. But let's keep going. Okay, so the next thing to talk about here is as we shift, one of the themes that we often see as we talk to our employer groups, whether you're self-funded or whether you're fully insured, is the engagement with your employees and their dependents, with your members, and that importance of member education. I think we talked about this last time. It's something that we are always out in the market talking about. But one of the things that's always brings an aha moment is the awareness to where prescriptions are filled matters. It can impact your bottom line, no matter where you are in the country, or no matter what kind of plan you have and what kinds of drugs are under your plan in your utilization. Where prescriptions get filled can make a difference. And here's an example from Cincinnati, Ohio. We pulled this just yesterday. This is a very common generic medication, lisinopril, 30-day supply, 20 milligram tablet. And you can see, as you look at the wide range of these 6 pharmacies, beginning with Walgreens and then down into those other pharmacies, you're talking 5 to 6 times the spend at pharmacies compared to the lowest one in this example is Kroger. And this is not, we're not just picking on Cincinnati, but this is common anywhere we go. I was in Birmingham, Alabama with Dr. Norm, where he lives, doing a finalist meeting, and there was a CFO of an employer group in the room. And as soon as she saw this particular slide, she got up and left the room, brought her whole staff in and said, this is what we need to let our employees know about, because it can impact what's happening, and then it can impact our ability to keep premiums down for them. So all of this just goes into how member education and members having information available is so important, not only for where prescriptions are filled, but all the other things available, where they are on their deductible, where they are on their out of pocket, what drugs are available to them, what communication they're receiving from their providers and their vendors, the interaction they're having with their prescribing physician, the interaction they're having with their pharmacist, all those things. So as we've really seen that, this has really been an ongoing, growing input. It's always been important for sure, but especially with how complex the prescription space is now, this is probably as important as it ever has been in terms of the importance of members having information available. And then, of course, now the challenge is them being able to use it in a way that's impactful for the plan. Okay, with that, we did want to leave time. We've got about 15 minutes left in what we thought would be our major portion here, and then we're welcome to open it up to any other questions. But I'm going to flip over to Dr. Norm now. Dr. Norm, as part of his background in clinical pharmacy, is going to talk a little bit about where he came from, but then how that translates into what's happening in the biosimilar landscape. for sure, as we flip the calendar into 2024, that biosimilar landscape is getting probably more press than it ever has. There have been some biosimilars that have been around for a long time, but almost because of Humira alone, the attention to biosimilars is as heightened as it's ever been. So let's talk about that a little more, and let's give you an idea of where the landscapes is, where we are today, and where it's going. So with that, I'll flip it over to you, Dr. Norm.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. So, yeah, just to kind of give a little bit of background. First off, don't be intimidated by all these words because it looks like a different language, with it all thrown up there. But we're not going to get into detail with all these. Just a real quick, this is kind of to give you an example of the upcoming landscape for biosimilars and the future releases for these parent drugs having losing basically the market exclusivity and giving way for biosimilars in their place to really change up the pricing and accessibility for patients. And that kind of leads into my past experience working in the rheumatology department. When I first got out of school, I went to Auburn University and came right out working in dispensing retail pharmacy. So I didn't do a residency or anything, which is, you can kind of go a couple different routes, but went into working at a Target pharmacy, worked there for about 5 years and enjoyed and learned a lot about dispensing and building rapport with patients on a every day-to-day level. Then after about 5 years there, I went to the University of Alabama at Birmingham Hospital and worked in a rheumatology outpatient clinic, helping patients to access specialty medications. So Humira is that top one, top left. We've kind of been hitting on it off and on throughout this presentation. And it's probably the most relevant topic for biosimilars that we can address right now. One of the examples I wanted to point back to when I was working at the rheumatology clinic, of course, I dealt with Humira. Access was always a difficult thing for some patients. We had a lot of patients who didn't have insurance. They may have had some insurance, but coverage may not have been as great. They maybe couldn't afford a copay and whatnot. So there were some patients who, they had to settle and not take Humira because of the cost. Wasn't the majority of them. Humira had patient assistance available and copay assistance. So for the large majority, they could get it, but there were still patients that I walked alongside that had trouble accessing a medication that I had actually seen some patients start on this particular medicine. They came into clinic in a wheelchair, started Humira, and about 3 months later, they were walking again. Their rheumatoid arthritis had been so severe and untreated, and then they literally held it as a miracle drug in their words. So that stood out to me. That I was like, man, I really wish some patients had better access. Well, kind of to sidestep for a moment, there's another medicine called Remicade. It's in the same class of medication as Humira. It does a similar mechanism of action in the body for treating rheumatoid arthritis, but it's an infusion. Humira is just an injection you give yourself once every 2 weeks. So much easier for patients, less burdensome than an infusion. But what we went through was Remicade released 3 biosimilars while I was working at the rheumatology clinic. And I worked with about 18 rheumatologists in the practice, so they were pretty extensive. One of them had actually written the clinical guidelines that the nation uses for treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. So it was a real honor to work alongside him. I really valued his opinion, and it was great learning underneath him. But what the concern was with the biosimilars for Remicade was their patients with autoimmune diseases had not gone through a transition like this before. There was a lot of question as to, is this going to work? Or is it going to be as effective? Are they going to tolerate it as well? They're going to have more side effects. So those were all questions that not only did the rheumatologists have, but this medicine treated patients with autoimmune disease and like gastroenterology space and neurology and dermatology. There was a lot of areas this overlapped in. Well, they rolled out the biosimilars, and the institution adopted a specific one that was about 70% less of cost to the parent drug of Remicade. So it was going to save the institution a lot of money because it was a very commonly used medication in the infusion clinic. So when they transitioned to it, they were keeping a really close eye on these patients to see how well it did, and it did great. The long story short, they did great. All the patients continued to have the same efficacy, same results. They had same disease control while being on this biosimilar of Remicade. So fast forward to today. I've been with MedOne about a year. I went through that whole period of accessing medicines and walking alongside patients, and now I do it here on this side of it. So I've kind of come full, so it's kind of the last piece of the puzzle. And I'm really fortunate to have that background and be in the current present time that we're at talking about this, because just in 2023, I think there was 9 or 10 total biosimilars released into the market. And I think Matt had said, Dr. Nate went into a little bit of detail of how those work, the differences in them. But the biggest thing is the variety and versatility of these different cost thresholds for some. Some are, a higher cost, you still get a rebate with it. And then some are low cost with little to no rebate. So there's a lot of options depending on the strategy you want to employ. We have partnered with a specific lowest cost biosimilar called Usimry. It's made by Coherus. So we kind of have adopted one that we want to use as a strategy, hoping to aim at that low net cost for our clients. But this transition was kind of something that we were like, we don't know exactly how it's going to go going into the new year. All these were released in 2023. You saw the drug spend for Humira. So a lot of patients we're going to have to have that discussion of like, how does that look moving from the parent drug to the biosimilar? And while we went through that, we've had conversations with a lot of members. There's been some hesitancy because a lot of times, psychologically, if you're on one medicine and it's been working, and as I mentioned, for some people it was a miracle drug. I don't want to switch from that because what if it doesn't work? But these particular biosimilars, they had to prove in clinical trials, just like Humira did, the same clinical efficacy, same safety. And then with my background, I've felt confident offering these particular agents. This isn't just like a generic with the same, having to meet at least 80% of the chemical viability. Like these are medications that are, almost close to identical. They're just not identical because they're a biologic agent. So it's you can't actually make an exact match. But everything points to it. And then my experience walking through it with patients was very positive and successful with the Remicade. So that's been a big thing that we've faced this year going into 2024 is approaching that, coming alongside members, coming alongside clients, and discussing that change and what it means, and basically doing what we're doing here today. This is the big change here, and this is kind of the approach we've taken. I'll kind of sidestep a little bit and mention that because of the wide variety of these, some of the discussion is, well, do you exclude Humira? Do you pick one? Do you pick some? What do you do here? And there's just a lot of options. Because it's kind of still a transition phase. There's been some news. I don't know if that's been caught, but CVS, they actually they've kind of shifted to, in April, they're going to remove Humira off of some of their formulators. They're not fully excluding it, of course, but they're actually developing their own agent that they partnered with. And it's here on this slide, the Huramaz. It's the third one from the bottom. So they've actually funded the production of that particular agent, and they're getting a piece of the pie too. So that's kind of a broad overview of it. And I think Matt just sent me question here.
Yeah, I just popped you a question that came in on the chat. If you want to take a look at that. For everyone's benefit, the question is a biosimilar always an infusion? That requires more time away from work. How do employers deal with that? A self-injection like Humira is easier. Norm?
Yeah, great question. So there's a lot to it. This is the biosimilars for Humira. So these are all mimicked the same administration style. So these are all self-injectable, same dosing as Humira. The Remicade I mentioned, it only comes in an infusion. To not get too off on a tangent, but they're actually trying to develop a self-injection for that particular one. But like I said, it's the same class of Humira. So to answer your question, no, a biosimilar is not always an infusion. It depends on the parent drug. So if on that previous slide, Matt, if you want to jump back real quick, there's a couple on here. So Actemra, right down there on the bottom, and that is a self-administered medication used to treat rheumatoid arthritis as well. They just, I think, at the end of 2023 announced that their biosimilar is coming out here in 2024 or early 2025. This also comes in an infusion as well. So when the biosimilar, the company who's making the biosimilar, they do their FDA request to get approved, they have to do it in a specific manner. So they don't just get this blanket approval that they get the infusion and the self-administered administration forms. They have to show it in the infusion space that it's just as effective, and then also in the self-administered space. So that's they're not all infusions. It just depends on the parent drug is kind of the clearest answer to that. And
While
then
you're looking at that question I just sent you, Norm, Jen actually pointed out, and she's absolutely right. So one of the things that we wanted to leave all of you with a takeaway with, and the strategic benefits team wanted to make sure to point out as well, is we look at this visual here. Wow, look at all these biosimilars in 2023, 2023, 2024, etc. It doesn't mean that immediately when these come out that boom, we're going to be able to save money on our plan because we can find utilizers to shift these biosimilars. This will be more of a slow drip approach. It will also depend on the carrier. And what Jen pointed out, and she's absolutely right, is beginning April 1st, Aetna is removing Humira from many of their commercial drug formularies. And what we started to see is that the large carriers, again, Aetna is doing this for April 1st, the large carriers are starting to get in line and adopt this. They weren't quite as quick to shift because I don't quite think as a large carrier, they can just make that change on a spot, but they are certainly starting to shift and doing so. Norm, I don't know if you have any additional comments on that based on what you've seen across the market.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. They are trying to take the time to evaluate what this change is because their formularies were so set. And I think a lot of it goes back to the rebate yield as well. It's with fully insured and different approaches, there may be more of a preference for that rebate. And then this kind of opens it all up. It's a lot of things to consider. It's not that it's still a bad option. It's just there's other options that may be worth exploring. If the net cost might be different and comparing what that looks like.
Norm, do you want to address the question that came in, and I'll read it for everyone's benefit? What % of users have difficulty or reactions to generics, and then they file an appeal to then use the brand name?
So in this, I don't know, this may be meant for the biosimilars. And if it's not, just drop it in and be like, no, it's just true generic. But it's a great question. So if a member or a patient says, I cannot take this, there's no, without even trying it, there's no medical evidence out there to show that there's going to be a difference. Because these are so specific, there's not a lot of difference in the inactive ingredients, which we would imagine for traditional generics to have more excipients is what we call them, the part that's not the active drug. There's more of that in there for a generic medicine. That's not the case for biosimilars. It's such a small quantity. It's the inactive ingredient is very minute and not reactive to the body traditionally. There's not a lot of medical evidence to show that would happen. Now, to percentage wise, I'm not sure. We haven't had, in our experience, had anybody say, I had allergic reaction to a biosimilar. So we haven't encountered that in the time that we've been dealing with it. Doesn't mean it won't happen. One thing I learned working as a pharmacist is everybody is different. But the numbers and the science, they also play a large part too. So, it's something that we definitely will keep an eye out for. We haven't prescriber wise, from requests, we have not had a lot of pushback because we kind of kept a pulse on that too, because we're like, there might be some presence here and see, but it's not been as resistant as we just weren't sure. So that's a really good question.
Thanks, Norm. Okay, this question came into me, and this is a very good question. How do you get PBMs to act on the best interests of the employer and employee? PBM contracts typically don't allow biosimilars, or it's this long drawn out process because the rebates are better than the brand. So they say. However, that analysis is never shown to the employer. That's a great question. I would one advise that you talk to your strategic benefits team about this exact thing, because that's a lot of what they can give you insight to. I will speak to you from a MedOne standpoint, is that this is kind of a passion project of ours. It's been a passion project of mine for years, is to bring employer groups just like you guys, awareness and visibility into what's going on. So you're absolutely right that traditional contracts, and especially in the large carrier world, and Norm talked about this too, they can't immediately shift away from the brand. I won't pick on any one particular brand, but let's say it's Humira. They can't immediately shift away from the brand and immediately go towards the biosimilar, because their contracts, they're what's the word? Handcuffed, if I could use that word, to those rebate contracts. And if they were to shift and begin preferring the biosimilar, they'd be in violation of those contracts. MedOne, we don't have that restriction. That's why immediately last year we were able to begin shifting towards the first biosimilar. Back to this slide here. The first biosimilar that came out was Amjevita. We immediately began looking for opportunities to shift to that. And then once Usimary came out in July, and that was identified as the lowest net cost medication, that's where we said, okay, this is what we need to be doing for the benefit of our employers. To your question, it is in the best interest of our employers and their members to have that drug. We find on an overall net basis, including rebate, there are generally four fills of Usimary that can be accounted for every fill of Humira. That's even taking into account the rebate on Humira. So yeah, that's a good question. Happy to help you dig into that a little more in partnership with your strategic benefits team. And that's something that you want to look at a little bit more and find out, what is your provider doing? What is your vendor doing in this space? And if they haven't shifted yet, when are they looking to make that shift? Because it's only going to be a matter of time. Again, all these changes here, back to this slide, are not going to happen overnight. And the adoption rate is going to vary based on the carrier. But no doubt, our position is that in 2-3 years from now, biosimilars are going to be as common of a thing as we're talking about. But that adoption rate will vary depending on who the carrier is. Okay, we wanted to be cautious of time. One, we wanted to come in under the hour time frame to give you all a little bit maybe time to get a refreshed coffee before your next meeting. But two, we also wanted to allow more time for questions. And then also, in particular, wanted to give Jen at Strategic Benefits a chance to even poke at anything that we can help explore a little further for you as we wrap up today. But specifically wanted to just leave time. So I'll keep an eye on the chat here. I don't think I've missed anything so far. Welcome any additional questions. But again, we hope this gave you guys more of an insight as to, one, some key things that are happening as we transition from 2023 to 2024. Some that have just continued, and they will keep continuing as well. Two, just some aha moments and some education as to where things are going. And then in particular, Dr. Norm being able to highlight biosimilars, the Humira biosimilar in particular, and where we are as we flip the calendar into 2024, as we work with our employer groups, and some things that you can be aware of, and maybe in partnership with the strategic benefits team, ask some questions. Okay, Oh, good question. So Jen wanted to highlight for the benefit of our attendees. This is one for you, Dr. Norm. Can you maybe just spend a few minutes on what we're seeing with Ozempic? We've talked about Ozempic in the past. We've talked about GLP-1s, but Norm, what are you seeing as you've been talking with our clients and our customers on that Ozempic and GLP-1 space? And then back that up, Norm, with maybe a couple quick comments on the compound industry as we have launched into 2024. So Ozempics and GLP-1s, Norm, first.
Yeah, so great. Yeah, it's always top of mind. And while we're talking about biosimilars, we end up doing, giving quarterly packages and reviews on spend for a lot of our employer groups, and it's pretty consistent that specialty medications are number one on the list. Right below it are brand diabetic medications, typically Ozempic. And I've actually, coming through, we just went through our implementation season with new groups coming on board. One of the things that stuck out to me with Ozempic was we had groups coming from fully insured, self-insured, all over. But one of the things was a preventative drug list was something that we always address in our implementations. When you come on board with us, we go through, like, we have a couple different selections of like what you can choose. It's usually not as comprehensive as other like fully insured companies may offer, but what we found was Ozempic and Mounjaro and all the brand diabetic medications, so like the GLP-1s as a class, they're on these preventative drug lists. So as they come on board, there is that realization that, hey, Ozempic was basically handed out for free, for the people who need it with type 2 diabetes, that's FDA indicated for. And then for also the people who may have been prescribed it off label for weight loss. So that distinction wasn't being made before because there was no close look. They were getting it basically free of charge because it's on the preventative list, so no copay to the member. And then additionally, we prior authorization all those medications to make sure they're being used appropriately. Now we know that there's all sorts of weight loss drugs coming to market here at the end of 2023 and then coming into 2024. So those Novo and those makers who have stake in Ozempic and Mounjaro, they've developed their own separate weight loss products specifically for it, which is great. It's indicated, treated. They've got the data to back it up. So they're kind of making that distinction, which is good. Hopefully we'll see as 2024 progresses less of that overlap of prescribing for Ozempic. But that's probably been the biggest thing top of mind for me. It really opened my eyes to say, wow, there's, basically it was like unrestricted access to it for a lot of groups. But we see that if we see that at the top of our spend list, then surely it's driving a lot of the spend on the other end if there's no restrictions or no look at how it's being used, in other situations. So
One of the
hopefully
biggest,
that answers.
yeah, one of the biggest aha moments I had throughout the last year was hearing our clinical team talk about, in comparison to what you saw in the headlines, especially driven by celebrity, because they bring the headlines, is that most people, a lot of people begin taking Ozempic, for example, and they jump right to what is it, Norm, the 2 or 3 milligram version.
Oh yeah.
However, really, and this is all drugs. All drugs have side effects, right? Fact of life, all drugs have side effects. What is supposed to happen with Ozempic is initially you're supposed to take that 0.25 milligram dose just to get your body adapting to the drug and used to the side effects. It may not actually deliver any kind of weight loss effects yet at that small of a dose. Then, Then you titrate up to the larger dose once you've gotten accustomed to and adapted to the side effects of that 0.25 milligram dose. But what's happening because of TikTok and social media and celebrities all showing this magic weight loss is people are just jumping right in. And that can be very, very tricky, very dangerous. And then also the other challenges, as you've seen in the headlines, is once you're on it, it's very difficult to come off of it. I saw a headline 2 weeks ago. Jillian Michaels, who's the famous physical trainer from Biggest Loser, she actually came out and said, well, yeah, guys, there's issues with this. Yeah, you need to think about that. So yeah, just interesting as you think about what's going on in this. Okay, let me check the chat here real quick. All right, any other questions or comments, aha moments, things you're left thinking about coming out of today? You're even welcome to pop in topics. We'll do another heat check. I guess we'll keep calling these heat checks. Kind of a neat name. We'll do another heat check next quarter. Happy to keep bringing you information to help you. So you're welcome to either shoot a note here in the chat, talk with your strategic benefits team about, hey, here's a topic that would be really helpful as we look to these ongoing educational sessions and heat checks. We're happy to take your feedback and put together some information to help as we would approach our next meeting. But for the benefit of the rest of their time here, is there any other questions or items that we can help with for today?
And Matt, hey, I just want to kind of back up what you just said. For people that are on any topics that are top of mind, we'd really appreciate you putting those in the chat feature or send Sarah an email. And the reason I've been so passionate about this and really wanting to have this series this year is because it's literally changing every day. I mean, if we could, we probably could have one every single week, and something that we would talk about would be different. That's how like ever changing it is. But to the best of our ability to stay in front of it, I'm in the industry and it overwhelms me. So I can only imagine, for the public. I am completely shocked by these Super Bowl statistics and these commercial costs, which just infuriates me, but that's a whole nother thing. But I really appreciate you even just showing us like how crazy out of whack this whole pharmacy world, has become. But I also feel like the more knowledgeable we are, knowledge is power, that if we can get the word out and certain tweaks, even as people who are consumers can make, might make a little bit of a dent in it. But I really appreciate your time. This has been really, really enlightening for me. So, and we will be sharing this and recorded it. So we're really excited for you guys allowing us to do so.
Happy to. And then I'll end with a quick story and then we'll adjourn for today. And I thought this would be a neat way to show why we're so passionate about this in combination with the strategic benefits team in bringing this information to you, helping you to hear and understand all these different complexities. And then as you guys then meet and talk further, ways to just be aware of it and what you can do about it and how to structure your plan to address all the things going on out there. This happened right here in Akron, Ohio, right here in Northeast Ohio. There is a colleague of mine at a TPA that we work with, and she's one of the directors of the TPA, and her teenage son, who's in college, is very allergic to poison ivy. I'm super susceptible to poison ivy. I can certainly relate to that. And her son actually got poison ivy recently to the point where it was in his throat, which, by the way, never had that, nor do I want to have that. I can't imagine poison ivy being in your throat. So he needed to receive an antibiotic, an oral antibiotic, to address it. Apparently, it's very addressable. You just need to get on the antibiotic right away. So because of time and him needing to go back to college, they went to a CVS Minute Clinic and immediately prescribed an antibiotic. Went to turn around and fill the antibiotic, and she called me because she was in shock. It was to the tune of $680 for just a few days supply of this antibiotic. And actually, Dr. Norm helped me with this because she said, is this really the right cost for this? Is there anything else we can be doing? So we looked into it a little bit further, and we found out that whether a liquid or a pill, it didn't matter for the son because he had to swallow it no matter what. And so they were prescribing the most expensive antibiotic, a brand name version of it. And through Dr. Norm's help, we were able to identify that there is a cheaper version of the antibiotic as a generic, and it was available as a pill form. And if the patient was okay swallowing the pill as opposed to the liquid, it was available for $60 I kid you not. And we also found out that the patient should call the CVS Minute Clinic and say, hey, don't fill this. I want to fill this as a generic, as a pill. And oh, by the way, go fill it at the local grocery store. So it's just a story where at first blush, treatment, throat, antibiotic, CVS Minute Clinic, sure, I'm prescribed a drug, turn around and fill the drug. Yeah. The member actually took the moment to ask a couple more questions, saved $600 with filling it at the generic, getting it filled at the grocery store. And it's just amazing to understand the complexity of that one interaction alone, where the CVS was just, she actually asked them, she said, why did you prescribe this for me? And the CVS just said, that's what we thought you wanted to fill. And you can turn around and fill it here. Why wouldn't you do that? I don't think they were expecting that she would ask a question around. So again, it's just awareness and what's going on in an industry that can make it so complex. And that's why we're so passionate about coming alongside and trying to help you. So with that, we will adjourn for today. As Jen said, this is available as a recording. And please reach out to your strategic benefits team if you have any questions. And again, we welcome any input or feedback as topics you'd like to see for these ongoing sessions as we go throughout the year. With that,
Awesome.
thank you guys. Enjoy the Super Bowl.
Thank
Have
you
some
so
chicken
much.
wings. Yep. And everyone have a great day.
All right. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.